Well, as Father Fred was proclaiming the gospel and we heard the last line of Jesus saying you are not far from the kingdom of God, I think that could be a reflection question for each of us. Are we near the kingdom of God? And secondarily, who or what do we love? Today's saint, Saint Norbert, was born nearly 1,000 years ago, but his life can inspire us today. He was born in Germany, and he sensed the call to the priesthood while recovering from a near-fatal horse riding accident. Unlike Father Patrick Peyton's path, after he recovered from tuberculosis, Saint Norbert faced some really difficult early challenges at the beginning of his priesthood. His brother priests were against his promotion of the ascetical way of life and the reforms of the church that he felt called to espouse. And the reaction was so strong that it forced Saint Norbert to ask for a meeting with Pope Gelasius II. And as a result of the meeting, Saint Norbert was permitted to become an itinerant preacher in the north of France. He would go on to found a religious community, the Norbertines, and he would become a bishop. In addition to promoting asceticism, he defended the rights of the church against the secular leaders. And it was with a lot of pushback from the local leaders, as you might imagine. So, some things don't change, but we follow the examples of the saints. Now, I've mentioned a couple times the term asceticism, which for some people has a really negative connotation, but I'd like to present it in a different way for all of our consideration. The simplest definition of asceticism is this: self-sacrifice, denying ourselves physical pleasures or conveniences to guard against valuing them over our relationship with God, our families, and all those that we are called to serve. While thinking about this, I did a little research and I read this great article that summarized the benefits of asceticism, written by a gentleman named Jeff Arrowwood. And here are some of the top findings that he said to inspire us. He said, asceticism combats habitual sin. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me in confession and say, Father, I hate to be confessing these over and over and over again. That's why we're here. So if you struggle to control your desire for something on a repeated basis, it could be anything. Practicing self-denial can build our spiritual muscles against this temptation. And as we build this strength, we grow in the virtue of temperance. And that's what helps to balance our desires for the physical goods of life with following God's will. Asceticism can also protect us against the excesses of culture. Like the culture in the early Christians lived in, our modern culture has deified entertainment, luxury, and physical pleasure. This asceticism helps us to set our hearts on the greater goods, or to resist a laxity of heart and to open our hearts to be transformed by the grace of God. Additionally, asceticism can move our hearts away from selfishness, something we are all prone to in our own ways. Self-sacrifice prevents our modern lifestyle from seeking too deeply into our hearts. This was the reason, by the way, why St. Francis required his brothers to serve the poor by living among them. It's also why the Dominicans took the vow of poverty back in that time. They wrestled with the same things we do. In the time of those great saints, monastic orders at the time were living very luxuriously. Religious men and women were losing their true sense of their vocation. And the same principle applies to each person, no matter what our vocation is. We can all be tempted. And lastly, asceticism should be seen as an act of love. Like the first desert fathers and desert mothers, we too can offer our self-sacrifice as a token of our dedicating our complete lives to Jesus. Our ascetical life can exercise the theological virtue of charity. It can be an act of love for God, and we can also offer our voluntary suffering for the salvation of souls, making it an act of Christ-like love for our neighbor. As I mentioned in the beginning, in today's Gospel from Mark, Jesus reminds us all that we are to love our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind and our strength, and that we are to love our neighbor as ourselves. Every now and then, we need to take some time in prayer and reflection to see how we're doing in following this teaching of Jesus. And part of the remedy for when we are drifting away, or part of the remedy to strengthen us, to stay on the right track, is to be like Saint Norbert and countless saints and brothers and sisters among us who practice this intentional self-sacrifice in love of God and love of our neighbor. My brothers and sisters, if we can grow in this way, then as Jesus said, we will always be near the kingdom of God. May God bless you all and your families on this holy day.